Contented Media presents Dr. Bitcoin, the man who wasn't Satoshi Nakamoto, an original podcast series with Mark Hunter and Arthur Van Pelt.
Hello and welcome to Dr. Bitcoin, the man who wasn't Satoshi Nakamoto, and our coverage of Craig Wright's two-day contempt of court hearing in London. With me, as always, is Arthur Van Pelt. Arthur, we were both in London this week to witness the events firsthand. How did you find the trip?
Oh, I loved it. I really loved it. I arrived in London the day before. I met all the friends, including you, not in the least. And yeah, it was just great to witness such a thing from close by. And by the way, you just mentioned the man who wasn't Satoshi Nakamoto. We can now say, who isn't Satoshi Nakamoto?
We should change it, shouldn't we? After all these years, I can't bring myself to change it now.
No. It's just a little joke. Hey, but it was great meeting you, Mark, and also other people like David Pierce and all the other people. It was just great.
All the other members of the cabal, we all came together and plotted our next how we're going to bring down Craig Wright to even greater extent.
Yes.
So we were in London town, for, as I said, Craig Wright's contempt charge, which all began through his filing of his Champagne case. Now, because we haven't covered the Champagne case in great detail so far, we're not going to start now except to discuss the points we need to for the two-day trial that took place. Day one on Wednesday was at the Royal Courts of Justice, and that was, I think, Arthur, for me, one of the big highlights was seeing that building. It was a stunning 19th century building. Unfortunately, you can't take photos inside, which is a real shame. But we arrived there, met each other for the first time, which was quite nice. Took the obligatory selfie and headed through the labyrinth that is the Royal Courts of Justice. Is this huge, wide building, and just trying to find that courtroom was just, I mean, luckily it was fairly well signposted, but it was just walking through these little corridors and labyrinths. It was actually quite a unique experience.
That was a challenge by itself already.
It was. And we arrived about sort of 10:15. wasn't too long before it started. Crashed through the doors. I think you tried your best to break a part of the door on the way in, I noticed.
Yeah. What happened was that when I opened the door, there was a little plinth somewhere, and I couldn't find the space where that plinth was originally situated, and that dropped down on the floor, and it made some noise, and all the people were looking like, "Oh, what's happening there? Who is demolishing our courtroom?" Oh my God, a little bit embarrassing. So
this building has stood there since the 1800s, and you come crashing through and demolish part of it, like a Viking invader or something. So we managed to get some seats at the last second. And it took me a little while to realise, because I was so focused on trying to make sure that I had a seat and being embarrassed for being what felt like being late, even though we were early, that I didn't notice that all of COPA's side, there was the two barristers, and there was all the Bird lawyers behind them in two rows. And on Craig Wright's side was completely empty. And it wasn't until it was pointed out, I was like, oh, he's not here. Thinking back to before the trial, what were your expectations of whether he was going to actually turn up or not? Because at one point I was 50-50, but the closer we got, the more convinced I was he was going to turn up. So it was a big surprise for me that he didn't. How about you?
No, yeah, that is exactly my what I also thought. I hoped and expected that he would show up, because I thought that his ego, his delusional mind would think that he could get away with. He still thinks that he can get away with everything, and this contempt thing was not going to change his mind. But obviously, we will learn a bit more and later that it actually did change his mind. He ducked the attendance of this hearing, and it was a sort of surprise for me. Yeah.
So we weren't quite sure. I mean, it got to sort of 27 minutes past 10, and we thought, maybe he's running late or something. I very much doubted it, but until it actually was supposed to start, you just never know. So 10:30 came and went, and we knew for certain he wasn't going to be there, and Justice Mellor hadn't taken his seat yet. So we thought, well, something's going on here. And then when Justice Mellor came in and proceedings started, Jonathan Hoff began by saying that there had been some developments overnight. And when you hear that, you just kind of think, oh, what has he done now? And so when Jonathan Hoff said that Craig Wright has sent an email at 9:39, I thought he meant 9:39 last night, but he actually meant 9:40 that morning. So as I was dashing off the tube and trying to make my way down High Holborn to get to the court, Craig Wright was emailing from whatever country he was in, we'll come to that later, to say that he emailed, I believe it seems like he emailed the judge's clerk and said, while I fully acknowledge the seriousness of the court order requiring my attendance, I must inform the court that I do not presently have the means to be in the United Kingdom. And that was kind of staggering, because when we heard that, we all thought, is he saying he can't afford a plane ticket? Is that the impression you got when you first heard that?
That is what my impression was indeed. That he had just, he is so poor he cannot afford a plane ticket.
Which, when the order was passed for him to attend last month, that was not a problem. You know, he said that he could attend on the 18th and 19th. He tried to get out of the in-person hearing, obviously, but once it was confirmed, he never once raised the fact that he couldn't afford the plane ticket. And then he also said, as he tried to say last time, that he couldn't attend because of work commitments. Which was, again, staggering, considering he had, a month to get these in place.
Yeah, 6 weeks even.
Yes, yeah. So COPA replied and said, okay, then, well, if you can't afford it, we'll happily, pay for your plane ticket. And he responded to say, the offer solely addresses a standard class return airfare, but does not account for the substantial financial burden beyond this, including accommodation, expenses related to extended absence from ongoing work commitments, and other necessary arrangements. So not only can he not afford a plane ticket, he also can't afford a hotel for a couple of nights. You almost would have more respect for him if he was honest and said, look, I just don't want to come. Like, I know that I'm in trouble and I'm just not going to appear. That, telling the truth, would not have gone down any worse than lying and saying he couldn't afford a plane ticket or a hotel. I mean, this is his pathological lying coming into play, isn't it?
Yeah, and just keeping his head straight for his fan club, and trying to be on top of it instead of just being honest, and that's where you see him piling lie on lie on lie.
So COPA replied and said, okay, well, how much would you need to cover your work losses? And this is the even more staggering bit. He said, the funding required to accommodate these expenses would be £240,000, calculated as £40,000 per month for the next 6 months. This reflects the lost contract and the financial requirements to address the situation. So he's suggesting that he can't afford a plane ticket, can't afford a hotel, but if he was to come and fork those things out, he would be losing £240,000 over the next 6 months. Do I need to ask where he's getting these numbers from? I don't need to ask, do I?
Well, because I happen to have been reading in the past few hours, I have been browsing quickly through the paper verdict, the paper order that was released yesterday. So I found some time to do that. And Mellor actually addressed this rather nicely. His thought was that he came up with this 6 months as being a time period of when he had to go to jail.
So he was already predicting it.
Yeah. This is probably an hint of Craig Wright that, when I'm coming to the UK, you will take me into custody and I will be gone for at least 6 months. And I'm losing revenues of 40,000 per month, or revenues or salary or project payments or whatever he thinks or whatever he is making up now.
He also tried to blame COPA for this loss of work. He said the actions taken by COPA, because of the actions taken by COPA, I am not in a position to pursue new business contracts effectively. I mean, that is just incredible. He is blaming COPA for pointing out his multiple lies, his hundreds of forgeries, hundreds of lies, his perjury on the stand, his contempt of court. Yet again, he's blaming other people for his own misfortune. Like I thought we had. This is very meta now. We've gone it's like blame inception. I mean, that's just taking things to a level that I didn't even think we'd see, to be honest.
Oh, it's so Craig Wright, always taking the side of the victim and playing the victim role. This is typically Craig Wright. I'm not surprised.
The last thing he said in this email was, however, I must emphasise that even with this funding, I would not be in a position to function adequately under the current circumstances. I cannot commit to answering questions under oath for COPA, nor can I feasibly travel to fulfil such obligations. What do you think he meant by he would not be in a position to function adequately and answer questions under oath? What does that mean?
Now, yeah, probably a hint to his medical situation, being an autist.
Yeah. So, but this is crazy because in order to make it fair for him, like they did with the trial, they would have gone to the lengths required to make it fair for him to answer these questions. And it's like saying, well, if I don't have a notepad to write on, I'm going to lie. Well, no, that isn't how it works.
Yeah, exactly.
What was quite funny is when I was doing some sort of live court reporting, and he, for some reason, I don't know why he chose me, but he replied to me to say that they'd offered only an economy flight and no hotel, and asked me to please be honest, which was just the most ridiculous thing he could have said.
Oh, the irony!
I know, and it's funny. If I've not been rushing and reporting at the time, I would have formulated a bit more of a pithier reply. But I didn't need to, because the replies from other people to that were just hilarious. He was just barracked with abuse after that. It was like, how can you of all people ask someone to be honest? It was so funny.
Yeah.
So yeah. So he didn't turn up. And that led to Justice Mellor, sort of asking Jonathan Hoff if he wanted to continue, and Jonathan Hoff said, "Yeah, we should carry on, as we need." And Arthur, what did Justice Mellor say about Craig Wright's non-attendance?
He was not pleased, of course, with the non-attendance of Craig Wright, and he even considered rescheduling the hearing. Well, that was a surprise, because that is something that goes on in his mind. And when you sit in the courtroom and you watch the events passing by and you listen to what the people are saying, you don't know what is in their head. And here Mellor opened up a little about what was in his head, but he didn't say anything about it during the session. So what he wrote about that in the order just now is, I did consider whether to adjourn the hearing to give Dr. Wright another opportunity to attend. However, I reached the clear conclusion that an adjournment would only result in wasted costs and wasted court time. Dr. Wright could have notified the court that he was not going to attend days or even weeks ago, but didn't. Subject to one point, I regard his estimate of loss to be grossly exaggerated, since, given he had more than 6 weeks' notice of this hearing. Mm-hmm. It is very difficult to understand why he could not have arranged his affairs so as to enable him to attend. Overall, his emails sent during the morning of the December the 18th indicate to me that he was going to continue to come up with every possible excuse to not attend. Mm-hmm. Now, and this is something from the mind of Mellor, and according to me, he is completely right about this assessment, of course. But again, you don't hear him say that in the courtroom, and it is nice to read those things.
Yeah. So the hearing went ahead, and COPA, pretty quickly, considering that Craig bailed with 45 minutes to go, they quickly kind of skimmed through some case law and this sort of thing, and knocked up 9 points to do with his lack of appearance, which constituted a further breach to the contempt that he was already on trial for. Arthur, very briefly, what were these 9 points that COPA came up with that they said should kind of add to Craig Wright's rap sheet on this count?
No, it is summarized in just a few of those, but it's more of the same. Those 9 points have to do with more the practical side of him not showing up. For example, Mellor again addresses all 9 of them, but I will just give you 3 of his addresses. That, for example, Dr. Wright has been served, including a notice of this hearing. So it's a practical thing. He was notified in time. He knew about this. There is nothing wrong. All the procedures have been followed. Mm-hmm. So what Mellor also said, I am entirely satisfied that Dr. Wright had sufficient notice to enable him to prepare for the hearing. Mm-hmm. And I agree with COPA that no sufficient reason has been given for his non-appearance. So this is just all the practical things, all the right procedures have been followed, and he was, from all angles, he was enabled to to come over and attend this hearing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in the end, Meller concluded, he said, overall, it is clear to me that Dr. Wright has voluntarily absented himself from this contempt hearing. Whether he has done so because of fears of being incarcerated if he returned to the UK or because attendance interfered with his business interests does not matter. He had ample time to rearrange any business meetings, so he could have attended. His non-attendance is a plain breach of my order that he had to attend. I considered it was necessary to continue with the hearing in his absence to deal with the contempt allegations expeditiously and fairly, particularly since he had made ample submissions in response to the allegations of contempt.
So those were the 9 reasons that COPA, well, some of the 9 reasons COPA wanted to add this on top, and what that would have meant for Craig Wright was that whatever sentence he was already looking at for the contempt itself was going to be potentially added on to by the fact he hadn't turned up. So yeah, he just made things much worse for himself by not turning up and then lying about the reasons why he wasn't there. So taking a step back, as far as the actual contempt case itself went, the reason why we were all there was because COPA had found 5 issues, well 6 issues, but one they withdrew regarding the Slack posting of his dissemination notice. So what was left with 5 points from the Champagne filing, where they said Craig Wright had breached the injunction that COPA obtained in, was it June, I think, or maybe perhaps July, when the whole COPA ruling and the injunction was formally kind of ratified. So Arthur, what were the 5 areas that COPA found in Craig Wright's Champagne passing off case filing that they said breached the injunction?
No, that all has to do with what is, of course, in the original order or judgment that Meller gave earlier this year, roughly half a year ago now, when he said that Craig is not Satoshi, mm-hmm. and that he is not allowed to start proceedings anymore while claiming that he is or hinting to those things. What this is again a little quote of how Meller addressed it, because he said, Dr. Wright shall not threaten explicitly or implicitly or procure any other person to threaten explicitly or implicitly that any precluded proceedings will be pursued against any person in the courts of England and Wales, the courts of any foreign jurisdiction, or in any arbitral tribunal wherever seated. Now, and this goes pretty far, because this is not only that he is not allowed to continue the lie that he is Satoshi, he is also not allowed to even hint to any Bitcoin copyright, database rights, goodwill, white paper actions that he was involved with or having cooperated alongside Satoshi. But that's where Craig Wright made several arguments to the opposite in his Champagne passing off attempt. And I will just mention one because the other 4 are basically roughly of the same type. And this is a part of that lawsuit filing that Craig Wright did. He said, Dr. Wright is the owner of goodwill, which exists in the name Bitcoin. It designates the electronic cash system defined in the white paper and operated by means of the software which Satoshi Nakamoto personally controlled up to and including April 2011. Dr. Wright holds substantial goodwill in the name Bitcoin, which has accrued through the development, promotion, and investment in the original Bitcoin electronic cash system, as defined in the white paper by Satoshi Nakamoto. This goes against the judgment and the injunctions that this judgment implied.
And let's not forget that Craig was on Slack, I think on Twitter as well, being very vocal about how clever he was in filing the Champagne case and skirting around the judgment, the injunction. He was so, he was his usual brash and boastful self that he'd found a way to skirt it. But the fact that he hadn't consulted any lawyers about this shows, because there are immediately 5 things flagged up as areas where as Justice Meller said in his original ruling, he's not as clever as he thinks he is. Yeah. And I think that's been proven with this filing. So those are the areas that COPA originally wanted to prosecute on. Jonathan Hoff argued for a 2-year prison sentence, an 18-month prison sentence with 6 months suspended, and the 6 months activated if Craig Wright breaches the injunction or breaches the contempt kind of ruling again. So he wanted 18 months straight away with 6 months potentially added on top. At this point, to me, I made the analogy on Twitter that this was now like a tennis match where one player hasn't turned up. So all COPA had to do was hit the ball over the net, get it in the court, and they would win because there's no one to return it. So all Justice Miller had to do overnight, because we broke around lunchtime on the Wednesday, all Justice Miller had to do overnight was decide whether COPA had got the ball in the court or not. And it seemed from what we could see that they had. And Arthur, at the end, again, I'm still not sure if this was a slip of the tongue by Justice Miller, or he, more likely, knew exactly what he was doing when he said they were going to invite Craig Wright back for the sentencing the following day. So by that point, when he said that word, I was like, oh, okay, well, that's that done then. Did you have the same thought?
Yeah. But of course, it was already a little bit of the expectation beforehand that we did not have to wait for a ruling for several weeks or several months anymore, because the case was pretty clear, and they did a 2 days hearing, was originally scheduled, which gives enough time. That was my general impression anyway, to do a sentencing like after the trial, when on the last day of the trial, that. When Miller also already mentioned that the major part of his ruling would be around Craig Wright is not Satoshi. So that was what I expected for this hearing also, to see a sentencing on day 2, or at least a clear hint. Well, we got more than a clear hint, but we will come back to that. Yeah.
We thought we might get a verbal ruling on day 1, but Justice Miller wanted the day to think about it. So we broke at, I think, 12:30, and he said, right, be back for 2 o'clock the following day for the ruling. We were all back in the Rolls building, so the building where the COPA trial took place, which is obviously a very, very different affair. But Arthur, it was quite nice, I think, because I'd already been there for one day in the COPA trial, but I think it was quite nice for you to actually see where the whole trial had gone down, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I have been now in two of the important buildings of this whole affair around Craig Wright. And, well, I'm jumping ahead a little bit already, but you might remember when we walked outside with a few of our friends after the Thursday hearing, or sentencing actually, that we were walking in the footsteps of all the people that went to the Rolls building and came to the Rolls building and walked away from the Rolls building, that we have seen on so many articles everywhere in the mainstream media, in the Bitcoin media, and everywhere. The people from Bird and Bird have been walking there up and down every day in that building, on the street outside. Now I still remember that we were outside with a friend and discussed this, and I was like, "Wow, we are walking here in the footsteps of giants." And let's mention Craig Wright also, because he has been walking there up and down many times also. Yeah, it was so cool. It was so cool. I took several pictures, and I will cherish them forever.
So we headed inside, annoyingly modern building, but, you know, one day in the Royal Courts of Justice is fine. At least we knew where we were going. We could get a lift there. So we got settled, and we saw, as we got in and got sorted, there was a screen with a Microsoft Teams link on it. And we thought, oh, are we going to be joined today? And indeed we were. We were blessed with Craig Wright's presence. Were you surprised to see him dialing in remotely from his small box room in wherever he was?
A little, yeah. I found it cool that he did it. I mean, you have to be somewhat brave or brazen, that is maybe the better word, to do so when you're scared of being. On the other hand, yeah, I'll give it to him. He is shameless enough to show his face and face what's coming to him. On the other hand, he has the security of his closet in Thailand or whatever it was, what we have been looking at. It was, again, not a very fancy place where he was situated. So, yeah, I was a little surprised. And his the things that he brought in, it was typically Craig, but we'll get to that.
Yeah, well, I think towards the end, Justice Miller asked this, but we'll tackle it now. He said, will you reveal what country you're in? And Craig thought for a while and said, Asia. And he said, that's not a country.
I know, that's a continent.
It's a continent. But so he wouldn't even reveal the country he was in. It was just ludicrous. But, you can understand why, because he didn't want to have any kind of potential of being extradited, which, again, we'll come to in a bit. So
yep.
Just before the trial started, or as we got going, the written judgment was kind of available for download. And one of the first things we noticed was 2 documents that Craig Wright had filed on the 11th of December, so in the lead up to it. One was a motion for judicial recusal, which, of course, the BSV crowd have been loudly trumpeting. And connected to this, the second, an affidavit from Gavin Gregory Mail. Now, this has been something that's been bubbling under for a while. We've all been very excited to see Gavin Mail's affidavit alleging all sorts of improprieties by Justice Mellor. In the ruling, Justice Mellor revealed that Gavin had cobbled together information from the live stream from the trial, his interviews with David Pearce that he had mangled and taken completely out of context in the months since, the change.org petition that was taken down because Jack Dorsey interfered, obviously, and some tweets. Most notably in the tweets, David's unfortunate typo between COPA and COPA, which, has just been the most ridiculous bandwagon on which the BSV crowd have refused to jump. Actually, it's so obvious what happened, but they just, because it fits the narrative, they don't want to hear it. Arthur, I will let you have the pleasure of revealing what Justice Mellor had to say about Gavin Mail's affidavit.
Yeah, he burned it down completely, which was to be expected.
Yes.
Yeah, he noted in paragraph 14, for those who are reading this order that was released yesterday, Justice Mellor said, although Mr. Mail concludes his affidavit by identifying patterns that create a real possibility of bias, I note that every fact or pattern on which he relies is exaggerated, sometimes grotesquely. In short, having considered all his allegations with great care, the best way to characterize his motion for recusal is that it amounts to taking 2 + 2, adding a great deal of unsupported supposition, and making 2 = 5 = 6, in circumstances where the actual facts add up to 4 and reveal no hint or appearance of bias. I can give 2 examples of his unsupported supposition. First, the allegation of maintaining contact throughout proceedings, and second, Mr. Mail's own confusion over the 2 events at which I have only ever encountered David Pearce. Mr. Mail asserts my account suggests a lack of candor, progressing from claiming attendance at a COPA event to later describing it as an Union IP event, requiring explanation in his written judgment, whereas my judgment explains very clearly that the Union IP and COPA events were 2 separate events some 15 months apart. Nou ja, this is just how Mr. Mail, I find his role so disingenuous. I can't say otherwise, because sometimes he just tried to be a little bit on the side of Bitcoin, and then he is on the side of BSV again, and then he is trying to be a little bit of critical on either side, but it ends up that he is fully on the side of Craig Wright and the BSV fan club. Yeah, and that comes down to this action, this affidavit action. And as expected, with everything that the BSV fan club, including Craig Wright himself, is doing, it goes nowhere.
And it just makes them look absolutely stupid. It makes them look like, I mean, it's what we've been seeing since the case was filed. It's just taking these tiny events that are not even, it's anything that isn't pure as the driven snow, they will pick it apart and twist it to fit their narrative, to the point where they're writing to the court and making these ridiculous suggestions. This is the thing that gets me, is they appeal to the very court they claim is corrupt for justice. So rather than appealing to the body that oversees judicial action and judges and this sort of thing, they write to the very judge they believe is corrupt and ask him to recuse himself. It defies logic on so many levels. It's like a logic-defying wedding cake. It's just ludicrous. There was a funny moment shortly after this when Jonathan Hoff was talking about how the two appeal judges that have been involved in this case are now also involved in the conspiracy, which goes as far as the aristocracy because of the use of the word lord in some filings or something. And we were all just cracked up. And Justice Mellor, I think I tweeted it, Justice Mellor nearly banged his head on the desk because he hung his head in despair so heavily.
Yeah.
It was just, in those situations, I think these BSV guys in their echo chamber, they air these theories. They whip themselves up into a frenzy because they all back each other's theories. One comes up with a theory, and they kind of in like a group motion. They all agree with it and amplify it. They get to an actual court, and then it's just in that scenario, in that context, it's just laughable.
Yeah.
And these things will never die, but they're given the treatment they deserve. So moving away from that. The most important thing was that Justice Mellor confirmed that he'd found against Wright as far as the 5 points went with the Champagne case. And Craig Wright was given the chance to actually comment. So Justice Mellor went through the 5 things, explained why he'd found against him, the reasons for it, and he gave Craig Wright the chance to respond. Arthur, bearing in mind this was Craig Wright's chance to protest his innocence against his contempt hearing, including, I think, the fact he didn't turn up, how did he respond to Justice Mellor's ruling?
He announced that he would appeal. He said, I still do not believe that the areas you have addressed are correct, and under the ECHR there are a number of cases that would apply, so it is my understanding that you are not correct. I do not agree with the factual statements you have made, and I will be appealing. There have been 17 changes to Bitcoin in the last 6 months alone. For example, Taproot, which enables money laundering in breach of the law. Now, so he comes up with basically nonsense, but for him it is somehow it makes sense. And what we have to understand here is that he is going to appeal the decision that he is in and has been in contempt.
And what I like as well is he's all against breaches of the law when it comes to when it comes to Bitcoin and BSV. But as soon as it comes to him, he's happy to breach the law. That's absolutely fine, and he finds excuses and reasons why he shouldn't have to comply with the law. Except when it comes to Bitcoin and BSV, he's really strongly against. He really supports the value of the law and upholding the law. It's so two-faced. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So after banging on about Taproot and CoinJoin and money laundering, Jonathan Hoff went through the Champagne case and Craig's attempt to garner support for that through a Slack posting, which was pretty much an FAQ that had been posted, giving details of the Champagne case and how Craig Wright was going to fund it, how he was a legal expert and this sort of thing, how they're going to get their money back. So that looked really, really bad for him. He denied that he denied he'd done it because of course he would. He said it was all someone else that posted this stuff. We broke for 20 minutes because Justice Mellor said, I'm going to 20 minutes to consider my verdict and we're going to come back in and I'll give sentence. So we broke for 20 minutes and then we all came back in and he gave his ruling that the Champagne case was kicked as an abusive process. The fundamental reason why the Champagne case was kicked was because you cannot file a case claiming that something is being passed off as something else if you're not the person who has been damaged by it. So in the Champagne case, the French winemakers, they made the champagne, so they were allowed to bring the case because they were being damaged. But you cannot bring a Champagne case if you're not the person that's been damaged by the passing off. And in saying he's been involved in the creation of Bitcoin, it allows him theoretically to file the case. But that's the reason why the injunction was broken. You cannot have one without the other.
Yeah, but Craig Wright realized that, and that's why his Champagne passing off case that he filed was sort of hybrid. ambivalent, maybe, about this, because he knew that he could not pretend to be Satoshi Nakamoto. Still, he had to come up with goodwill and investments and copyright and database rights and everything, that he owned it. So he is indeed, or pretends then to be, a victim of this supposed passing off. And that was also something, maybe good to mention it now. Mellor was aware that Craig Wright was only involved in Bitcoin since 2014.
Yeah.
Which is correct. That is when his Satoshi cosplay started. And then Hoff, I think, added that it was actually 2013 already, when he was getting more involved with Bitcoin. And that implied at the same time that there was no evidence whatsoever before 2013 that Craig Wright was involved physically with Bitcoin, which is totally correct. I've been saying this for so many years, so I was really pleasantly surprised when this subject came up, because I have been banging the drums about this so many times. He didn't even know, he knew about Bitcoin in 2011, that is what we know, but he was not even physically touching Bitcoin before April 2013. I found it pretty cool to realize that the judge and the lawyers are fully aware that this whole scam with Bitcoin only started in 2013.
Mm-hmm. So what was interesting from the kicking of the champagne passing off case was that there was talk, I believe, in the BSV community that they would either take it on themselves, either one case with all of them chipping in, or someone, I believe, mentions each of them filing a case just to try and kind of drown the court with these filings and hope that one got through. But you cannot do that without one of you somehow being involved in the creation of Bitcoin, and none of you are. So this champagne passing off case cannot proceed unless the actual Satoshi wants to pursue it, which of course he won't. So that whole area is dead on a point of principle, which is obviously good news for the people targeted. So on to the sentencing. Justice Mellor discussed the various kinds of sentence he could issue, because he already discussed with Jonathan Hoff the potential of a suspended sentence, and that my ears pricked up when he said suspended sentence, because I was leaning towards that, because as he pointed out in his sentencing, Craig Wright could just hop around different countries that have no extradition treaty if you were to sentence him. So he would be a criminal on the run, but practically it wouldn't have much impact in deterring him from making any other related filings. So once he mentioned that, I thought, we could be going in that direction. And Justice Mellor said that Craig Wright has shown no contrition. He said his understanding of promissory estoppel is legal nonsense, which Jonathan Hoff also agreed with. And so Justice Mellor issued a 12-month prison sentence, suspended for 2 years. So the legal reality of that is that Craig Wright is still a free man. He can still come and go from the UK if he wants to, and he will not be taken into handcuffs unless he breaches the contempt ruling again within that time. So the whole purpose is that he is deterred from filing anything that's going to potentially be a breach of the injunction again. The whole purpose, as Justice Mellor made out, is to prevent him from doing this. Arthur, what was your initial reaction when he passed that sentence?
No, I was quite content with it, because it was exactly what I was expecting. I had to digest a little bit the part of suspended, but I could easily live with it, because the major part of what happened was that the passing off case was kicked. So that was the major thing about this. And of course, the jail time, either now or being suspended, is still it's jail time, and I already can predict that this jail time will be at some point fall on this, because it's only a sword of Damocles to give Craig Wright 2 years, and of course payment of the costs to COPA. Now that are the three major elements of this sentence, and it's again a major loss for Craig Wright. So I was content with it. I noticed, of course, that several people were less content about the suspended part. I can understand that to a certain extent, but it is still being ruled that he has to face jail time when he is in contempt again. Now, we can only wait for it. I mean, we have now collected 5 cases of contempt, plus, and I consider it also being a contempt case, when he did not show up for this hearing. You can already predict that Craig Wright, he cannot hold back, and he will fall in the same trap again in 2 years. So this, for me, this jail time of 12 months is a given. That will happen either when he is in the UK, but I don't think he will ever come back to the UK anymore. But
no,
then they can take him from the streets, and otherwise there will be an extradition going on. And for me, it's already 99.99% clear that it's going to happen probably within a few months already.
Yeah, he can't help himself. And he's already said he's going to fight and he won't give in and this sort of thing. And it's inevitable, you know. And I wonder if that's part of Justice Miller's thinking, is that he knows Craig by now. He knows what he's going to do. So he's given him a lenient sentence. He said, right, this is your chance to do the right thing. This is your chance to abide by the law you so strongly believe in. And he's given him 2 years to do that. And we know for sure he's going to do something to breach it. Is it, like you say, it's inevitable. And I think, for me, part of the reason that the people are disappointed is because they wanted to see him punished for what he's done, as did we. But you have to face the reality. Something like this, I mean, extradition is only ordered for the most serious crimes. You know, you're talking, murder or something of that level, or massive fraud, like huge fraud against a lot of people. You know, these major crimes are the only things that really get extradition. There's the prison overcrowding element as well, that they mentioned that does play into it a bit. So I don't think he was ever going to get extradited for this. I don't think it's serious enough to warrant it at this stage. So that was never going to happen anyway. So it would have been nice to have him as a convict. It would have been great, but I don't think it was going to have any practical gain, because he could just stay in these extradition-proof countries. And like we say, we think he's going to do it again. So it's almost guaranteed it's going to happen. So it's not perfect, but in the circumstances, it makes absolute sense. And the moment I realised he wasn't going to be there, you knew that limited what could happen. So we'll see within the next few months how quickly he can break this.
There is something to say. It crossed my mind that when he did not show up and we had to digest things, to me at least, it made sense that when he is not showing up, it's another contempt case. So not only the 5, I would say he added up. He added another one to the list, which that's why I understood that some people are a little disappointed that he was not convicted for jail time straight away with an extradition order to go with it. Because if you are already, you have 5 proven cases of contempt from that passing off case, you're not showing up for the hearing, which is another. So it could have enraged Meller into making a more severe order. But that did not happen. Again, I could live with it because, again, he has now jail time on his name when he is making a mistake again. Now, and Craig Wright making a mistake in the upcoming months, it's a given for me.
Yeah, it is. Also, he's already said he's going to appeal. I mean, he will appeal everything he possibly can. I mean, I know he can appeal the ruling over the contempt. I'm assuming he can appeal the sentence. Maybe Justice Miller said that and I missed it. So he's going to appeal everything he possibly can. But I think it seems to me that everything is so clear-cut and, like with the COPA trial, so one-sided. I mean, actually, the COPA trial is a good example because he took his appeal to the appeals court to ask for permission to appeal the case. And he was so soundly rejected that it just shows how bad his understanding of his case is. And it seemed to me that the same principle applies here. His understanding of the criticisms put to him, the judgment put to him, his understanding is so minimal and so skewed that I think he's got as much chance of winning an appeal from this area as he had with the COPA trial itself. What do you think?
Yeah, I think the odds of winning anything with this appeal is zero, below zero.
So what happens next? Well, obviously Craig's going to appeal, and those appeals will go through, but unless his appeal is granted, unless any of his appeals are granted, then we won't be covering any rejections of the appeal, because we're getting towards that end game now. I mean, we wouldn't have been doing this episode if this contempt hearing hadn't sort of been here. So looking forward to next year, what seems to be happening, what's in the works, is that COPA, we think, are going to continue to push for a civil restraint order, which means that Craig Wright will be designated a vexatious litigant, which will probably stop him from being able to file any lawsuits based on certain parameters. So let's say it's regarding Bitcoin and Satoshi, whatever the parameters are. If COPA is awarded that, he won't be allowed to file any lawsuits based on that. So that's going to be interesting to see. Obviously, of much more interest is the referral to the Crown Prosecution Service, which will now take place, because Justice Miller said he had a discussion with Jonathan Hoff, and Jonathan Hoff said, we can pass you the contact details for the relevant CPS department. And he said, yes, please, you'd like those. So we now know for sure that the CPS hasn't had the case until now, so they will get the case. So next year they'll decide on that. So if the CPS agrees to press charges against him for perjury and for defrauding the court, that I think is more likely to be an extradition worthy offence if they can get hold of him. If not, he'll just be tried in absentia anyway. So that's one we would definitely cover, because that would be the crowning glory. But if the CPS decides for whatever reason it's not going to cover that, then that will probably be, as far as we are concerned on this podcast, that will probably be the end of things. It's a nice kind of conclusion to come to. Arthur, if the CPS does take up the case, he is cooked. There's no two ways about it. It all depends whether they take it up or not. But do you agree that if they give the green light, he is done for?
That is for me a clear-cut case. Also, it's for me not a question if they will take it up, because it is hard for me to imagine that you go to court. COPA brought him to court. They have been chasing him for a few years. He has been lying about being Satoshi. He has been lying about having copyright, having written the white paper. Then a long string of forgeries followed before the trial took place, and even during trial, several cases of fraud upon the court has been addressed, has been mapped out, and has been ruled about. And it is so hard for me to imagine that you lie like no tomorrow in the courtroom. You forge like no tomorrow with over 500 forgeries has been found over the whole COPA case. And he even had the nerves to create new forgeries and lie about them. And he tried to involve counsels, not only his current counsel, but also previous counsel, thinking about Ontier here, to blame them for a certain role in all those forgeries. He is blaming N-Chain and ex-colleagues at N-Chain for things that has never happened. And I mean, it's so hard to imagine that they will let this go. This is, for me, typically a case that should be addressed with a rather firm jail time. And if it is 5 years, 7 years, or 10 years, I don't mind. But he should go to jail. A signal should go out to the world out there. Yeah, this should not be possible in the UK. When it comes to lie up in front of a judge and forge in front of a judge and make up the most ridiculous stories and hoping that the judge will believe you, but then burn down like Craig Wright has been burned down in court, that is typically something that should be addressed with a firm jail time, if you ask me. And of course, I cannot predict what the CPS will do, but I expect them to do what is justice.
So we'll wrap things up now for that episode, and that's going to wrap things up for this year. And Arthur, I think it's quite fitting, actually, that the fact that this year, 2024, is the year that Craig Wright's ambitions have finally been kind of shot and killed, because it was 10 years ago that he emailed Louis Kleiman and said that, you know, your son Dave and I are two of the three people behind Bitcoin. So his Satoshi cosplay started in earnest 10 years ago this year. And in fact, I remember when he was on trial, it was 10 years to the day when he was on trial and lying about it. So I think it's quite fitting that this year of all years should be the one. It's a nice little way to bookend a decade of lies and forgery, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It has taken too long in hindsight, but now that we have reached the stage that he will not be able, his whole career as a Satoshi candidate is firmly over for the whole world, except for this little fan club. That is also something that I noticed. When you think about the last years, almost 10, probably less than 10 years. He was Professor Faustus on Twitter, I think around 2014, 15, in that era when he started to cosplay as a Satoshi, and he managed to get up to, if I remember well, 40,000 followers. That was the era when he was still, well, sort of believable for a larger group. Then that account was killed. Not sure when anymore, but then he started with an account on Twitter with Dr. She is Right, I remember. So almost 3 years ago. And because it was early 22. This account started, and that never managed to get, I think, above 20,000 followers. I think he reached almost that number, which is already half of his previous account. And now he is working with an account on Twitter called CS Tomanoga or something, and I think he does not even have 4,000 or 5,000 followers right now. So you can see the downfall in with this type of anecdotes quite clearly. He's gone. He's done with.
Well, Arthur, it's been quite a year going through the COPA trial and then the contempt and everything, seeing him finally sort of finished off for the whole world, as you say. So thank you for everything for this year. Thank you for a lovely couple of days in London. It was great to meet you finally. And I'm sure we'll speak again next year. But yeah, it feels like we're coming to the end. So thank you for everything you've done for the Bitcoin community and helping me make this the success that it's been. Thank you.
Yeah, it's been a great pleasure, but I still think that we will have several episodes to go when it comes to lawsuits and Craig Wright facing CPS and going to jail. I think we will maybe a handful in 2025, a handful of episodes to go, and I'm still looking forward. I thought I was done with it, but every time when you ask me, can you come back for the podcast, I'm still happy to do it.
Excellent. Well, I'd be concerned the day you say no. So let's keep going to the end.
Yes, sir.
Arthur, thank you once again. Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And I'm sure, as you say, I'll speak to you next year.
Yes. Cheers, Mark.
Thanks. See you. Thank you for listening to this episode of Dr. Bitcoin, the man who wasn't Satoshi Nakamoto. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on your podcast platform of choice to get these episodes the moment they drop. And if you enjoyed what you heard, we'd really appreciate a star rating and even a review to help us get this out to as many people as possible. Our monthly bonus episodes are available to download from our website for a small consideration. And if you'd like to access all these bonus episodes, plus these monthly updates a few days early and other goodies, you can do so by becoming a Dr. Bitcoin supporter. See the details in the show notes for information on how to do this, or head to our website, drbitcoinpod.com. That's drbitcoinpod.com. You can also follow us on Twitter at drbitcoinpod, and you can email us at drbitcoinpod@gmail.com. That's drbitcoinpod@gmail.com. Thanks very much for listening, and we'll speak to you again soon.
You've been listening to Dr. Bitcoin, the man who wasn't Satoshi Nakamoto. Written by Mark Hunter, with additional material by Arthur Van Pelt. Editing and production by Mark Hunter. This has been a Contented Media production.